They called her Scarecrow. They laughed when she stumbled. They placed bets on how many days she'd last before the beast of Ridgebreak sent her running home in tears. Or worse. But when Clara Hensley walked those 5 miles through scorching Texas dust with nothing but a blank letter and $50 worth of desperate hope, she had no idea the trap wasn't just cruel. It was deadly. The town wanted a show. The banker's son wanted revenge. And the man they feared most? He was about to aim a rifle straight at her heart. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The summer of 1882 burned Texas like a punishment. Dust hung in the air of Ashford Springs thick enough to taste, coating tongues and teeth, settling into the creases of work-worn hands and the corners of tired eyes. The town square shimmered under waves of heat that made the wooden storefronts look like they were melting, sagging under the weight of a sun that showed no mercy and asked for none in return. Clara Hensley stood outside Pritchard's general store with her hands clasped in front of her faded calico dress, trying to make herself invisible. It never worked. Invisibility required indifference, and this town had decided long ago that Clara was far too entertaining to ignore. "Well, well," Bo Weller's voice cut through the afternoon heat like a knife through rotted fruit. "If it ain't our little Scarecrow, standing there like she's waiting for a brain." Laughter rippled through the group of young men lounging under the store's awning. They were all cut from the same cloth, sons of money, raised on entitlement, bored enough to find sport in cruelty. Bo was their ringleader, a tall man with golden hair and a smile that looked expensive because it was. His father owned the bank, half the businesses on Main Street, and most of the debt that kept Ashford Springs running. Clara's fingers tightened against each other, but she didn't respond. Words only fed them. "I'm talking to you, Scarecrow." Bo pushed off the post he'd been leaning against and sauntered toward her, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust. "You deaf as well as useless?" "I heard you." Clara's voice came out quieter than she wanted, but at least it came out steady. "Then answer when your betters address you." Thomas Kirk, one of Bo's faithful shadows, snickered. "Maybe she can't. Maybe that dress is stuffed with straw, too." More laughter. A woman passing by, Mrs. Henderson from the boarding house, glanced over, saw Clara's situation, and kept walking. No one intervened. They never did. Clara had learned this truth the hard way over the past 3 years. When her mother died of fever, the town offered condolences. When her father turned to drink to drown his grief, they offered judgment. When Clara started taking in sewing and mending to keep food on the table and a roof over their heads, they offered her the nickname that stuck like tar, Scarecrow. She was too thin, too pale, too quiet, too poor. The dress she wore had been her mother's, taken in and taken in again as Clara's body forgot what regular meals felt like. Her dark hair, which had once been her mother's pride, now hung limp and dull, pulled back in a simple braid that did nothing to soften the sharp angles of her face. She looked, as Bo had so cleverly observed, exactly like something you'd stake in a field to frighten crows. "I need to get home," Clara said, trying to step around him. Bo moved to block her path. "Now that's just rude. Here I am, about to do you the biggest favor of your miserable life, and you can't spare a minute for conversation?" Something in his tone made Clara pause. Not kindness, Bo Weller didn't traffic in kindness, but there was a particular edge to his words, a theatrical quality that suggested he was playing to his audience. "What favor?" The question came out before Clara could stop it. Bo's grin widened. He reached into his vest pocket and produced a folded piece of paper with the deliberate slowness of a magician revealing his trick. "This came for you. Special delivery." Clara stared at the paper. "I don't understand." "Of course you don't. Understanding requires thinking, and thinking requires a brain, which brings us back to—" "Just tell her, Bo," one of the other men called out. "I got money riding on this." That sent a chill down Clara's spine despite the heat. Money riding on what? Bo held the paper just out of her reach. "Turns out old Cal Donovan up at Ridgebreak Ranch is in need of some help. Gentle hands, he says. Someone with a woman's touch for his animals." He paused, letting the words hang. "He's offering $50 for a week's work." The square went quiet. Even the men who'd been laughing stopped. $50. Clara's mind raced through the calculation she'd been avoiding all month. $3 owed to the general store, 7 to the doctor who'd tried to help her father through his last bender, 12 to the landlord who owned their small house and was tired of excuses. The rest would buy food, real food, not just the cornmeal and beans that had been their diet for months. $50 was 3 months of sewing income, maybe 4. $50 was breathing room. $50 was hope. Why would he send for me? Clara asked, hating how much she wanted this to be real. Says right here, Bo waved the paper. Heard about your gentle way with things. Needs someone who won't spook his stock. Thomas snorted. Stock. That's one word for what he's got up there. Shut it, Bo said mildly, but his eyes never left Clara's face. He was watching her the way a cat watches a mouse it's already caught. So, what do you say, Scarecrow? You brave enough to spend a week at Ridgebreak? Every instinct Clara possessed screamed that this was wrong. Cal Donovan was a ghost story the town told. The Beast of Ridgebreak, a massive scarred man who'd lost his wife 5 years ago and hadn't been seen in Ashford Springs since. Mothers used him to frighten children into good behavior. Men lowered their voices when they spoke of him, if they spoke of him at all. The ranch itself sat 5 miles north, isolated and silent, connected to town by a rutted road that nobody traveled anymore. Why would a man like that send for help? Why would he send for her? But $50. I'll go, Clara heard herself say. The laughter that erupted was immediate and vicious. Men doubled over, slapping their knees. Thomas actually had to steady himself against a post. Bo's grin stretched so wide it looked like it might split his face. You'll go, he repeated, as if savoring the words. You hear that, boys? Scarecrow's going to Ridgebreak. Give me the letter, Clara said, reaching for it. Bo held it higher. First, let's make sure you understand the terms. You walk to Ridgebreak. Nobody's giving you a ride. You present this letter to Cal Donovan. You do whatever work he asks for 1 full week. Then you collect your $50 and come back to tell us all about it. Agreed? Agreed. Clara's hand stayed extended. And when you come back crying after one night, Bo continued, when you show up shaking and begging to be saved from the beast, you'll tell everyone in this square that you're exactly what we've always said you are, a useless, worthless scarecrow who can't do nothing but take up space and steal air from folks who matter. The cruelty landed like a fist, but Clara kept her hand steady. She'd heard worse. She'd survived worse. Give me the letter. Bo placed it in her palm with exaggerated gentleness. Good luck, Scarecrow. You're going to need it. Clara folded the paper carefully and tucked it into her dress pocket. She turned and walked away from their laughter, her spine straight and her eyes forward, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her run. She made it 3 blocks before her hands started shaking. The house Clara shared with her father sat at the eastern edge of Ashford Springs, where the town gave way to scrubland and the buildings got smaller and meaner. It was a narrow structure with a sagging porch and windows that didn't quite close, the kind of place that looked temporary even though Clara had lived there all her life. Her father was where she'd left him that morning, slumped in his chair by the empty fireplace, a bottle at his elbow. Robert Hensley had been a carpenter once, skilled enough to build half the fine houses in town. Now his hands shook too badly to hold a hammer, and his eyes rarely focused on anything except the bottom of whatever he was drinking. Papa, Clara knelt beside his chair. I need to tell you something. He blinked slowly, trying to bring her into focus. Clara, girl? I'm going away for a week. There's work. Real work. With real pay. She pulled the letter from her pocket but didn't unfold it. Something made her want to keep the words private, at least until she knew what they said. I'll be back before you know it. Work. Her father's voice was thick, slurred. Where? Ridgebreak Ranch. The name penetrated the fog. Robert's eyes sharpened, and for a moment Clara saw the man he used to be, the one who'd carried her on his shoulders, who'd taught her to measure twice and cut once, who'd loved her mother so completely that losing her had broken something fundamental inside him. No. He tried to stand, couldn't quite manage it. No, Clara. That man, you can't. It's $50, Papa. The number stopped him. He looked at her, really looked at her, taking in the dress that hung on her frame, the shadows under her eyes, the exhaustion she wore like a second skin. Shame flickered across his face. I'll be careful, Clara promised. I'll do the work. collect the money, and come home. 1 week. The things they say about him are probably lies. Clara made her voice firm. You taught me that. Remember? You said half of what people say is nonsense and the other half is worse. This is just a job. Robert reached for her hand, his grip weak but desperate. Your mama would never forgive me if something happened to you. Then I won't let anything happen. Clara squeezed his fingers. There's bread and cheese in the cupboard. Mrs. Chen from 2 houses down said she'd check on you. Don't give her any trouble. Clara, I love you, Papa. She kissed his forehead, pulled her hand free, and stood before he could see the fear in her eyes. She packed quickly, an extra dress, her mother's old medical kit with its herbs and bandages, a canteen, and the last of the dried meat. The letter she kept in her pocket, still unread. Some superstitious part of her thought that reading it might make it disappear, might reveal this whole thing as the cruel joke it probably was. Dawn would be the best time to walk, cooler, safer. But something told Clara that if she waited, she'd lose her nerve. Better to go now, in the late afternoon, while the anger and humiliation were still fresh enough to fuel her steps. She left her father sleeping in his chair and stepped out into the brutal Texas heat. The road north was exactly as bad as Clara had feared. The main street gave way to packed dirt, which gave way to nothing but 2-wheel ruts separated by scrub grass and stones that turned ankles if you weren't careful. The sun beat down without mercy, turning her dress into an oven and her skin into something that felt like it might crack and peel away. Clara walked. 1 mile passed, marked by a dead cottonwood that stood like a sentinel over empty land. 2 miles, and the last scattered buildings of Ashford Springs' outskirts faded behind her. 3 miles, and she had to stop to drink from her canteen, forcing herself to take small sips when everything in her screamed to drain it dry. The landscape around her was unforgiving, flat scrubland dotted with mesquite and prickly pear, broken only by the occasional rocky outcropping. Nothing moved except the heat shimmer and the vultures that circled high overhead, patient and knowing. 4 miles, and Clara's feet were bleeding inside her boots. She could feel it, the wet warmth mixing with dust to create a pace that made every step agony. Her vision swam. The heat pressed down like a physical weight, and twice she stumbled, catching herself on shaking legs that didn't want to support her anymore. This was the joke, she realized. This was the punchline Bo and his friends were waiting for. Clara Hensley, dead on the road to Ridgebreak, killed by her own desperate stupidity. They'd find her sun-bleached bones in a few weeks and laugh about how Scarecrow finally lived up to her name. But $50. Clara pulled the letter from her pocket with trembling hands and unfolded it for the first time. The paper was good quality, expensive, the kind you used for important correspondence. She held it up, squinting against the glare. It was blank. Completely, absolutely, perfectly blank. Clara stared at the empty page, her mind refusing to process what her eyes were telling her. She turned it over. Nothing. Held it up to the light. Nothing. There were no words, no message, no request for help or offer of work, just expensive paper and the sound of distant laughter echoing in her memory. The cruelty of it hit her like a physical blow. They'd sent her out here to die as entertainment. Bo probably had his friends positioned somewhere with a spyglass, watching to see when she'd collapse. $50. There had never been $50. Clara's legs gave out. She sat down hard in the dirt, the blank paper clutched in her hands, and for the first time since her mother died, she wanted to cry. Not the silent tears she'd shed into her pillow at night, but the kind of crying that emptied you out, that admitted defeat, that surrendered to the unbearable weight of being alive when everything hurt and no one cared and the world was just an endless series of cruelties dressed up as jokes. But crying took water, and she didn't have water to spare. Instead, Clara sat in the dirt and stared at the blank page and tried to find a reason to stand back up. The sound reached her before the sight did. A low, anguished lowing that spoke of pain and fear. Animal pain. Something suffering. Clara lifted her head. There, maybe half a mile ahead, a structure broke the flat monotony of the landscape. Not much, a barn, a house, a few outbuildings clustered together like they were trying to keep each other company. Ridgebreak Ranch. She'd made it. Somehow, impossibly, she'd made it. The crying came again, clearer now. A horse, Clara thought, in bad trouble. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. Every living thing deserves kindness, Clara girl, especially the ones in pain. Clara folded the blank paper, put it back in her pocket, and stood up. Her legs screamed protest. Her feet felt like raw meat. The sun was starting its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that looked like fire. She walked the last half-mile because there was an animal in pain, and because she'd come this far, and because turning back meant dying anyway, and because, underneath all of it, she'd stopped believing she deserved better than this. The ranch emerged from the heat shimmer like something out of a fever dream. The barn was large, surprisingly well-maintained, its red paint faded but intact. The house was smaller, functional, with a porch that wrapped around two sides. A water pump stood in the yard. Chickens scratched in the dust. It looked almost normal, almost peaceful, except for the crying. Clara followed the sound to the barn. The door was closed, but not latched. She put her hand on the rough wood and pushed. It swung open with a long, drawn-out creak that sounded like a warning. The interior was dark after the blazing sunlight, and for a moment Clara could see nothing but shadows. Then her eyes adjusted, and she made out stalls, equipment, bales of hay. And in the far stall, something moving, something suffering. She took a step inside. The click of a rifle cocking froze her in place. "Turn around." The voice came from her left, deep and rough as gravel scraping stone. "Slow! Hands where I can see them!" Clara's heart hammered so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She turned slowly, raising her shaking hands. The man who stepped out of the shadows was exactly what the stories had promised. And worse. Cal Donovan was massive, easily 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders that looked like they could carry the barn if needed. His face was a map of violence. A scar ran from his left temple down across his cheek, pulling his eye slightly askew. Another cut across his jaw. His hair was dark and wild, hanging past his shoulders. His eyes were the cold gray of a winter sky, and they held no mercy, no warmth, no recognition of her humanity. The rifle he held was steady, aimed directly at her chest. "I don't know you," he said, "and I don't recall inviting strangers to my property." Clara's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Fear had stolen her voice. "Speak or leave. Choose fast." Clara forced the words out. "I was told you needed help. I have a letter." Something flickered in those cold eyes. "Show me." Clara reached slowly into her pocket, acutely aware of how the rifle tracked her movement. She pulled out the blank paper and held it up with trembling hands. Cal crossed the space between them in 3 long strides, snatched the paper, and held it up to the light filtering through the barn slats. Clara watched his face as he processed what he was seeing, or rather, what he wasn't seeing. His jaw tightened. The muscles in his neck went rigid. When he looked at her again, something in his expression had shifted from cold suspicion to something harder to read. "Who sent you?" His voice was quieter now, which somehow made it more frightening. "Bo Weller, in town. He said you needed someone with gentle hands for your animals. He said $50 for a week's work." Cal crumpled the blank paper in his fist, the sound of it like bones breaking. "And you believed him?" It wasn't a question, but Clara answered anyway. "I needed to." The admission hung between them. Cal studied her, really studied her, taking in the dress that barely fit, the face sharp with hunger, the boots with dust-caked blood seeping through worn leather. "You walked here?" "Yes." 5 miles. In this heat. For a job that doesn't exist, because you needed $50. "Yes." Clara's legs chose that moment to start giving out. She swayed, caught herself. "I'm sorry. I'll go." She turned toward the door. The world tilted sideways. She heard the rifle clatter to the ground, heard heavy footsteps, felt massive hands catch her before she hit the dirt. "God damn it," Cal muttered. Then Clara's vision went dark, and the suffering animal's cries followed her down into unconsciousness. Fog. Water. Clara's first coherent thought was water, cold and shocking against her face, her neck, soaking into her dress. She gasped and choked, her eyes flying open. Cal Donovan knelt beside her, a bucket in one hand. They were outside now, in the shadow of the barn. The sun had moved lower, its light turning everything golden and strange. Drink. He thrust a tin cup at her. Clara's hand shook too badly to hold it. Cal made an impatient sound, then held the cup to her lips himself, tipping it slowly so she wouldn't choke. The water tasted like rust and earth and life. She drank it all. More? His tone suggested this was a one-time offer. Clara nodded. He refilled the cup from a pump near the barn and brought it back. This time her hands were steady enough to hold it herself. "Thank you," she whispered. Cal stood abruptly, as if her gratitude made him uncomfortable. "You can't walk back. You'd die before you made 2 miles. I'll rest first. Then I'll go." "You'll rest, then you'll still die. It's nearly sundown, temperature drops fast out here, and you're in no condition to handle it." He ran a hand through his wild hair, and Clara saw that his knuckles were scarred, his fingers slightly crooked from breaks that hadn't healed right. "There's a spare room in the house. You'll stay there tonight. Tomorrow I'll take you back to town in the wagon." It was the most practical form of kindness Clara had ever received. No warmth to it, no comfort, just the bare minimum required to keep her alive. She should have been grateful. Instead, she found herself saying, "The animal. The one crying. What's wrong with it?" Cal's expression closed off completely. "Not your concern. I could help. You can barely stand. My mother was a healer. She taught me things. I'm good with animals." The words tumbled out faster than Clara could stop them. "Please, let me at least look." "Why?" The question came out harsh. "You don't owe me anything. This ranch, this situation, none of it's your problem. Because something's suffering." Clara met his eyes, refusing to look away from their winter sky coldness. "And because I walked 5 miles for a job that doesn't exist, and I'm going back tomorrow to a town that sent me here to die for entertainment, and maybe, just maybe, I'd like to do one useful thing before I have to face that." The silence stretched between them. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. The animal in the barn cried out again, weaker this time. Cal turned and walked toward the barn. Clara took that as permission. She stood, slowly, carefully, and followed him. Inside, Cal lit a lantern and warm light filled the space. Claire could see the barn was clean, well organized. Tools hung on walls. Hay was neatly stacked. The stalls were mucked and fresh. Whatever else Cal Donovan might be, he wasn't neglectful. He led her to the far stall and stood back, his body language making it clear this was her choice, her risk. Clara looked over the stall door and felt her heart break a little. The mare was beautiful, or had been. Red coat, white blaze, the kind of animal that would have commanded attention in any setting. Now she lay on her side in the hay, breathing fast and shallow, her eyes rolling with pain and fear. Her left foreleg was wrapped in bandages that had once been white, but were now stained dark with blood and worse things. "What happened?" Clara whispered. "Stepped in a gopher hole 3 weeks ago. Leg broke clean through. I set it, wrapped it, did everything I know." Cal's voice was flat, emotionless, but Clara heard the helplessness underneath. "It's infected now, getting worse every day. I should put her down. I know I should, but He stopped, started again. "Her name's Ember. She was my wife's horse." Understanding crashed over Clara like a wave. This wasn't just a sick animal. This was the last living piece of someone he'd loved and lost. "May I go in?" she asked. Cal opened the stall door without a word. Clara stepped inside slowly, making herself small and quiet. She'd learned this from her mother, how to move around animals in pain, how to become something they could tolerate instead of fear. She didn't speak, didn't reach out, didn't do anything except exist in the same space, breathing slowly, letting Ember see her and smell her and decide she wasn't a threat. It took 10 minutes before the mare's breathing slowed slightly, another 5 before she stopped rolling her eyes. Clara knelt in the hay and finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hey there, beautiful girl. I know it hurts. I know you're scared. I'm going to look at your leg now, okay? I'll be gentle. I promise I'll be gentle." She reached out slowly, telegraphing every movement, and carefully began unwrapping the bandages. The smell hit her first, sweet and rotten, the unmistakable stench of infection. When the last layer of cloth came away, Clara had to force herself not to recoil. The leg was a mess, swollen to twice its normal size, angry red streaks radiating from the break site. Pus oozed from multiple places. The infection had been left too long, wrapped too tight, allowed to fester in darkness and heat. "Well?" Cal's voice came from the doorway. Clara sat back on her heels and made herself tell the truth. "It's bad, but not hopeless. Not yet." "What do you need?" The question surprised her. Clara looked up and found Cal watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Clean water, boiling if possible, salt, honey if you have it, clean cloth, a sharp knife, and light, lots of light." She paused. "And I'll need your help. I can't do this alone." Cal nodded once and disappeared. Clara heard him moving around the barn, heard the scrape of a fire being lit in a brazier, heard water being pumped. He returned with armfuls of supplies and began setting up without being told, positioning lanterns around the stall, building up the fire, setting water to boil. "Tell me what to do," he said. Clara took a breath. "Hold her head. Talk to her. Keep her calm. This is going to hurt her badly, and she needs to know she's safe." Cal moved to Ember's head without hesitation. He knelt in the hay, lifted her head gently onto his lap, and began stroking her neck with those scarred, work-roughened hands. "Easy, girl," he murmured. "Easy now. Remember the meadow. Remember running. We'll get you back there, I promise." His voice transformed when he spoke to the horse, became something soft and broken and human. Clara heard the grief in it, the love, the desperate hope. She picked up the knife and got to work. The next hour was brutal. Clara opened the worst of the infected areas and flushed them with salt water while Ember screamed and thrashed, and Cal held her steady, talking constantly in that low, soothing voice. She cleaned away dead tissue, packed the wounds with honey, and wrapped everything in clean cloth with careful precision. By the time she finished, Clara's hands were covered in blood and pus, her dress was ruined, and she was shaking with exhaustion. But the leg was clean. The infection had been halted, at least for now. "She needs fresh wrappings twice a day," Clara said, sitting back against the stall wall. "Keep her still. Keep her calm. Watch for fever. If the swelling goes down in the next 2 days, she's got a real chance." Cal carefully lowered Ember's head back to the hay. The mare's eyes were closed now, her breathing slower, steadier. He stood and looked down at Clara, and for the first time since she'd arrived, something that might have been respect flickered in his cold gray eyes. "You did good. We'll see." Clara tried to stand, couldn't quite manage it. "Ask me again in 2 days." Cal extended his hand. After a moment's hesitation, Clara took it. He pulled her to her feet with the kind of easy strength that spoke of a lifetime of hard physical labor. "Come on," he said. "You need food and sleep, in that order." Clara followed him out of the barn on legs that felt like water, leaving bloody footprints in the dust that the darkness quickly swallowed. The joke, she thought distantly, had definitely not gone the way Bo Weller had planned. And somehow, impossibly, she was still alive to know it. The house smelled like dust and disuse, and something else Clara couldn't quite name. Loneliness, maybe, given physical form. Cal led her through a door that opened directly into a kitchen, its surfaces clean but bare. The kind of space that saw function but never comfort. A single plate sat drying by the sink. 1 cup, 1 fork. The arithmetic of solitude. "Sit." Cal pointed to a chair at the small wooden table. Clara sat, too exhausted to do anything else. Her feet throbbed with every heartbeat, and she was suddenly desperately aware that she hadn't eaten since early morning. The water she'd drunk sloshed uncomfortably in her empty stomach. Cal moved around the kitchen with surprising efficiency for a man his size. He built up the fire in the cook stove, filled a pot with water, and began pulling items from the cupboard: beans, salt pork, an onion. His movements were economical, practiced, the routine of someone who'd been cooking alone for a long time. "There's a washroom through there." He nodded toward a door on the far wall. "Clean yourself up. By the time you're done, food will be ready." Clara stood carefully and made her way to the washroom. It was small but functional, a basin, a mirror spotted with age, a pump that brought up cold well water. She caught sight of herself in the mirror and barely recognized the face looking back. Dirt streaked her cheeks, her braid had come half undone. Her eyes looked too large in her thin face, ringed with exhaustion and something that might have been shock. She pumped water into the basin and began washing the blood from her hands. Pink water swirled down the drain. She scrubbed until her skin felt raw, until she couldn't smell Ember's infection anymore, until her hands shook too badly to continue. When she returned to the kitchen, Cal had set 2 places at the table. Steam rose from 2 bowls of beans and salt pork, simple but substantial. A plate of cornbread sat between them. Clara's stomach twisted with hunger so fierce it was almost painful. "Eat slow," Cal said, sitting down across from her. "You're half starved. Too much too fast will make you sick." Clara wanted to protest that she was fine, but the truth was written all over her body. She picked up her spoon and forced herself to take small bites, even though everything in her screamed to shovel the food down as fast as possible. They ate in silence. Cal finished quickly and sat back, watching her with those unsettling gray eyes. Clara tried to ignore his scrutiny and focus on the food, on the incredible luxury of eating something hot and filling. "You're better than you should be," Cal said finally. Clara looked up. "What?" "With the horse. Your mother taught you, you said?" "Yes." Clara set down her spoon. She was the closest thing Ashford Springs had to a doctor for animals. People would bring her sick livestock, injured dogs, once even a hawk with a broken wing. She'd patch them up, teach them how to care for the animal properly. She never turned anyone away. "She sounds like a good woman." "She was." Clara's throat tightened. "She died 3 years ago. Fever took her in less than a week." Cal nodded slowly. "And your father?" "Drinks." The word came out flat, honest. "He used to be a carpenter, a good one, but losing her broke something in him that won't heal." "So you're alone." "Essentially." Cal stood abruptly and moved to the stove, refilling his coffee cup from a battered pot. He held the pot up questioningly. Clara nodded, and he poured her a cup as well. The coffee was strong enough to strip paint, but it was hot and real, and Clara wrapped her hands around the warmth gratefully. "The town," Cal said, returning to his seat. "Ashford Springs. They know what they did, sending you out here?" "They know." Clara met his eyes. "That was the point. Explain." So Clara told him about Scarecrow, about Bo Weller and his games, about being entertainment for people who had nothing better to do than torment someone weaker than themselves, about the $50 that never existed and the blank letter and the 5-mile walk that was supposed to kill her. Cal's expression didn't change as she spoke, but his hands tightened around his coffee cup until Clara thought the metal might bend. "They bet on it," she finished. "On whether I'd make it, how long I'd last, what would happen. Thomas probably won, since I actually reached the ranch alive, though I suppose the day's not over yet." "Why tell you $50? Why not a smaller number?" Clara looked down at her coffee. "Because $50 is exactly enough to matter. 10 wouldn't have been worth the risk. 100 would have been too obviously fake. 50 is possible. 50 is hope. That's what makes it cruel." The silence that followed was heavy enough to feel. Outside, the last light was fading from the sky, and darkness pressed against the windows like something alive. "I should have shot him," Cal said quietly. "What?" "Bo Weller, 5 years ago, when his father tried to buy this land. The boy was there, smirking, making comments about my wife. I should have put a bullet in him then." Cal took a long drink of coffee. "Would have saved everyone a lot of trouble." "You knew them? The Wellers?" "Everyone knows the Wellers. They own half the territory and want the other half. This ranch sits on top of an underground spring, only reliable water source for 20 miles. Marcus Weller's been trying to take it for years. When my wife was alive, I told him no often enough that he finally stopped asking. After she died," Cal trailed off, staring into his cup. "After she died, I made it clear that the next person who came to my door with an offer would leave in a box." Clara processed this information slowly. "So the town's afraid of you." "The town thinks I'm a monster," Cal's voice was matter-of-fact. "Beast of Ridgebreak, killer, madman. They've got plenty of names for me, and I've done nothing to discourage them. Easier that way, keeps them away." "Are you?" Clara asked. "A killer?" Cal looked at her directly. "I've killed men. In the war after, defending what's mine. I won't apologize for it. But I'm not what they think I am." I'm not dangerous to people who don't come looking for trouble. And me? Was I trouble? You were a half-dead girl with a blank letter about to collapse in my barn. Something that might have been humor flickered in his eyes. Different kind of trouble. Clara found herself almost smiling. Almost. I'm sorry for intruding, for all of this. You didn't intrude. You were sent. There's a difference. Cal stood and began clearing the table. The spare room's upstairs, first door on the right. There's a bed, clean sheets. You'll sleep there tonight. And tomorrow? Tomorrow I take you back to town, like I said. Clara felt something cold settle in her chest. Back to town meant back to Beau's laughter, back to Scarecrow, back to her father's drinking and the debt and the slow starvation of trying to survive on sewing work that barely existed, back to being entertainment. What about Ember? She heard herself ask. Cal paused in the act of pumping water into the sink. What about her? She needs twice daily care. Fresh bandages, monitoring. You said yourself you don't know how to handle the infection. I'll manage. You'll kill her trying. Clara stood, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten. I can help. I know what to do. Give me the week. The week? That's what the fake letter promised, wasn't it? A week's work. So give it to me. Let me stay. Let me help Ember heal. Clara's words came faster now, driven by something she didn't fully understand. Desperation, maybe, or the stubborn refusal to let the joke be the final word. I won't get in your way. I'll sleep in the barn if you want. I'll earn my keep. Just give me the week. Cal turned to face her fully. There's no $50. I know. There's no pay at all. I didn't ask for help, and I don't have money to spare even if I had. I know that too. So why? The question came out harsh. Why stay? Why not go back, tell them what happened, get on with your life? Because there's an animal suffering that I can help. Because going back means... Clara stopped, searching for words. Because I walked 5 miles to get here, and I'm not ready to make it meaningless yet. Cal studied her for a long moment, his scarred face unreadable. Then, slowly, he nodded. 1 week. You help with Ember. You stay out of the house except for meals. You do what you're told, when you're told. And at the end of the week, I take you back and that's the end of it. Agreed? Relief flooded through Clara so intensely she had to grip the edge of the table. Agreed. Good. Now get upstairs and sleep. Tomorrow starts early on a ranch. Clara made her way upstairs on legs that trembled with exhaustion and something that might have been hope. The room Cal had indicated was small and plain, a bed, a dresser, a window that looked out over darkened fields. But the sheets were clean, like he'd promised, and when Clara lay down, the mattress felt like the greatest luxury she'd ever known. She was asleep before she could wonder if she'd made a terrible mistake. Dawn came too soon and too bright, dragging Clara from sleep with the kind of ruthless efficiency that suggested Cal Donovan didn't believe in gentle awakenings. She heard him moving around downstairs, heard the clatter of the cook stove being stoked, heard the screen door slam as he went outside. Clara dressed quickly in her spare dress. Not much better than the ruined one, but at least it didn't smell like infection and blood. Her feet were a mess of blisters and raw skin, but she wrapped them carefully with strips torn from her old dress and forced them back into her boots. Pain was something you pushed through on a ranch. Her mother had taught her that too. Downstairs, she found eggs and bacon keeping warm on the stove, along with more of the strong coffee. Cal was nowhere to be seen. Clara ate standing up, then washed and dried her dishes, leaving them exactly where she'd found them. If she was going to stay here, she wouldn't be a burden. She found Cal in the barn, already working. He'd mucked 3 stalls and was starting on a 4th when Clara appeared in the doorway. Ember needs checking, she said by way of greeting. Cal straightened, pitchfork in hand. So check her. Clara gathered the supplies she needed, clean water, fresh bandages, the honey. She moved slowly into Ember's stall, making the same careful approach as the night before. The mare's eyes were clearer this morning, and when Clara spoke softly, Ember's ears flicked forward in something that might have been recognition. Good girl, Clara murmured, kneeling beside the injured leg. Let's see how you're doing. The bandages came away easier this time, and underneath, the swelling had gone down slightly. The angry red streaks were fading, the wound still oozed, but it was clearer now, less infected. Progress. Real, measurable progress. "Cal," Clara called out. "Come look!" He appeared in the stall doorway, still holding the pitchfork like a weapon he might need. Clara pointed to the leg. "The infection's responding, see? The swelling's down, the discoloration's fading. She's fighting it off." Cal moved closer, going down on one knee beside her. He studied the leg with the focus of someone who'd learned to read injury and sickness through hard experience. When he looked up, something had softened in his face. "You weren't lying. You do know what you're doing." "I told you my mother taught me." "People tell me lots of things. Most of it's lies." Clara began cleaning and rebandaging the leg with careful precision. "Is that why you live alone? Because people lie?" "I live alone because my wife is dead, and I don't like company." The words were blunt enough to be a warning, but Clara pressed on anyway. "What was her name? Your wife?" Cal was quiet for so long that Clara thought he wouldn't answer. Then, barely above a whisper, "Sarah." She must have been special to inspire this kind of loyalty. Clara nodded toward Ember. "She was everything." Cal's voice went rough. "She made this place alive, made me alive. When the fever took her, it took—" He stopped, stood abruptly. "Finish up here. There's other work that needs doing." He left before Clara could respond. She heard his boots on the barn floor, heard him return to mucking stalls with an intensity that spoke of anger or grief or both. Clara finished with Ember, whispering reassurances the mare probably didn't understand but seemed to appreciate anyway. Then she stepped out of the stall and found Cal watching her from across the barn. "You know how to handle chickens?" he asked. "Yes." "Water pump needs priming. You strong enough?" "I can manage." "Root cellar's got vegetables that need sorting. Anything rotten gets thrown to the pigs." "All right." Cal nodded shortly. "Then get to it. We don't keep idle hands on this ranch." The day that followed was brutal in a completely different way than the walk had been. Clara worked until her back screamed and her hands blistered, until sweat soaked through her dress and her vision swam with exhaustion. She collected eggs, primed the pump, sorted vegetables, hauled water, and fed chickens. Cal worked alongside her, never quite close, always watchful, as if waiting for her to break or fail or prove herself another kind of lie. She didn't break. By midday, the heat was oppressive, and Cal called a halt. They ate in the kitchen again, bread and cheese and cold water, in silence that felt less hostile than the mornings had been. Clara noticed that Cal had set out a small jar of salve beside her plate. "For your feet," he said gruffly. "Saw you limping." Clara looked at the salve, then at Cal, searching for mockery or pity. She found neither, just practical acknowledgement of an injury that needed tending. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Just use it. Can't work if you can't walk." After the meal, Clara checked Ember again. The mare was standing now, tentatively putting weight on the injured leg. It was too soon to celebrate, but it was progress. Real, undeniable progress. "She's trying," Clara told Cal, who'd come to watch. "She's Sarah's daughter, her last foal. Of course she's trying." Cal reached out and stroked Ember's neck with surprising gentleness. "She's got her mother's stubbornness." "Tell me about Sarah," Clara said softly. "If you want to." Cal was quiet for a long time, his hand still moving across Ember's coat in slow, rhythmic strokes. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, younger somehow, less guarded. "Met her in town. She was buying fabric at Pritchard's store, and I'd come in for nails. She smiled at me, and I forgot why I was there. Forgot my own name for a minute." A ghost of a smile touched his scarred face. "She wasn't afraid of me. Everyone else took one look at these scars, at my size, and decided I was something to fear. Not Sarah. She saw right through all of it." "What happened to her?" "Fever. Same as your mother. Came on fast, took her faster. One day she was laughing in the kitchen, planning next year's garden. 3 days later she was gone." Cal's hand stilled on Ember's neck. "I buried her under the cottonwood tree on the East Ridge. That's where she liked to watch the sunset." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. Sorry doesn't bring anyone back. Work does, surviving does, getting through another day does." Cal stepped away from Ember, his walls slamming back into place. Get back to your chores. Daylight's burning. The afternoon passed in more work, mending fence line, hauling feed, cleaning tack. Claire's body screamed protest at every movement, but she kept going because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant acknowledging how much everything hurt. As the sun began its descent, painting the Texas sky in shades of fire and gold, Cal called her over to where he stood by the barn. "You did good today," he said, not quite meeting her eyes. "Better than I expected." "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. Tomorrow's harder." But there was something in his tone that might have been approval, maybe even the beginning of respect. That night, over another simple meal, Clara found herself telling Cal about Ashford Springs, about the people, the gossip, the small cruelties that made up daily life. He listened without commenting, occasionally nodding, his face unreadable. "You hate it there," he said finally. "The town." Clara considered this. "I hate what I've become there. Scarecrow, the joke, the thing people use to feel better about themselves. So why go back? Where else would I go?" Cal had no answer for that. 3 days passed this way, falling into a rhythm that felt almost natural. Wake before dawn, check Ember, work until exhaustion, eat in silence, sleep hard and dreamless. Ember grew stronger each day, the infection retreating, the swelling disappearing. By the 4th day, she was walking short distances around her stall. By the 5th, she was nickering for Clara when she heard her voice. Clara felt something she hadn't felt in years, useful, necessary, like her hands could build instead of just survive. On the morning of the 6th day, everything changed. Clara was in the barn with Ember when she heard horses approaching. Multiple horses, moving fast. She stepped out of the stall to find Cal already there, rifle in hand, his face set in hard lines. "Get in the house," he said quietly. "What's happening?" "Now, Clara." The urgency in his voice sent Clara running. She made it to the house and pressed herself against the wall beside the window, peering out through a gap in the curtains. 6 men rode into the yard, led by someone Clara recognized even at a distance. Beau Weller sat astride a beautiful chestnut gelding, dressed in expensive riding clothes, looking like he owned the world and was just deciding which piece to ruin first. Cal stood in the middle of the yard, rifle lowered but ready, his massive frame radiating barely controlled violence. Beau reined in his horse and smiled his expensive smile. "Well now, Cal Donovan, it's been a long time." "Not long enough," Cal's voice carried clearly through the still morning air. "State your business or get off my land." "Now that's not very neighborly. I come all this way to check on the welfare of a young lady, and this is the greeting I get?" Beau's eyes scanned the ranch, missing nothing. "Where is she, Cal? Where's our little scarecrow?" "Gone. Walked back to town days ago." "Liar." Beau's smile never wavered. "Her father says she hasn't been home. No one in town's seen her, so either something terrible happened to her on your property, which would be a shame, Cal, a real shame, or she's here. And I'm thinking she's here." Claire's heart hammered against her ribs. She should have known they'd come. Should have known the joke wouldn't end just because she'd survived the walk. "What do you want, Weller?" Cal asked. "Just to talk to her. Make sure she's all right. You understand, don't you? People worry when girls disappear near your ranch. Given your reputation." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Clara saw Cal's hands tighten on the rifle. "She's under my roof, under my protection. That means she's none of your concern." Beau laughed, and his men laughed with him. "Protection. That's a good one. The beast of Ridgebreak protecting anyone." He leaned forward in his saddle. "Here's the thing, Cal. My father's getting impatient about this land. The spring underneath it could water half the territory, and you're hoarding it out of spite. Now, we've been respectful, giving you time to grieve and all that, but time's up. We want this land, and we're prepared to make you a very generous offer. I'm not selling. You haven't heard the offer yet. Don't need to. This land was Sarah's. It stays mine. End of discussion." Beau's smile turned sharp. "See, that's where things get complicated, because if something unfortunate were to happen on this property, say, a girl from town goes missing, presumed dead, well, that might bring the law down on you pretty hard. Might even force a sale to cover legal troubles. Might even lead to hanging, depending on what evidence turns up. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Cal raised the rifle. Get off my land. Or what? You'll shoot 6 unarmed men? That'll really help your reputation. Bo gathered his reins. Think about the offer, Cal. Think about what happens to stubborn men who don't know when they're beaten. And think about that girl in your house, and what people might say about her staying out here with a man like you. He wheeled his horse and rode off, his men following. But one of them, younger than the others, with an uncertain face, glanced back at the house with something that looked like shame before spurring his horse to catch up. Clara watched until they disappeared down the road, dust hanging in their wake like a curse. Then she stepped out onto the porch. Cal stood exactly where he'd been, rifle still in hand, staring at nothing. When he finally turned to look at her, his expression was darker than she'd ever seen it. Pack your things, he said flatly. I'm taking you to town. Today. Right now. Cal, this isn't negotiable. You heard him. He'll use you to take this land, and I won't let that happen. So let me stay and help you fight. Fight? Cal barked out a bitter laugh. There's no fight. There's him with money and power and the law on his side, and there's me, a scarred monster the town already hates. You think anyone's going to believe my side of anything? Clara stepped off the porch, moving closer. I believe you. You don't count. The words stung, but Clara pushed past the hurt. Then make me count. Let me stay the week like we agreed. Let me testify if it comes to that. Let you what? Get hurt? Get killed? Have your reputation destroyed because Bo Weller decided you're a useful weapon? Cal shook his head violently. No, I've lost enough. I won't lose someone else because of this cursed land. I'm not Sarah, Clara said quietly. Cal flinched like she'd slapped him. I know that. Do you? Because it seems like you're so afraid of losing someone again that you'd rather send me back to a town that sent me here to die than let me choose to stay. It's exactly about that. Clara took another step closer, close enough to see the conflict warring in his gray eyes. I'm not asking you to protect me, Cal. I'm asking you to let me stay and do the work I promised to do. One more day, that's all. Then, if you want to take me to town, I'll go without argument. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the sound of wind moving through dry grass and the distant call of a hawk. Finally, Cal lowered the rifle. One more day, but if Weller comes back, he won't. Not today. He made his threat. Now he'll wait to see if it works. Cal studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. One more day. But you stay close to the house. You see riders, you hide. You hear anything unusual, you get to safety first and tell me second. Understood? Understood. And Clara? Cal's voice went soft, almost gentle. Thank you. For staying. For everything. Clara felt warmth bloom in her chest, unexpected and dangerous. You're welcome. They stood there in the morning sun, a scarred giant and a girl called Scarecrow, and something shifted between them, something that felt like trust, like the beginning of understanding, like two broken people recognizing brokenness in each other and deciding it didn't have to mean defeat. In her stall, Ember nickered softly, calling for breakfast. The world kept turning. The work remained. And tomorrow, Clara knew, would bring its own battles. But for now, for this one stolen day, she had a place to stand and a reason to stay standing. That, she thought, was more than she'd had in a very long time. The day that should have been Clara's last at Ridgebreak Ranch stretched into something neither of them had anticipated. Cal worked with a fury that bordered on violence, attacking fence repairs and barn maintenance like they were enemies to be conquered. Clara kept close to the house as promised, but found herself drawn again and again to the kitchen window, watching for dust on the horizon that might mean riders returning. None came. By afternoon, the tension had loosened its grip enough for Cal to speak more than single-word commands. He came into the kitchen where Clara was preparing vegetables for dinner, his shirt dark with sweat, his hands filthy with work. Ember's walking without a limp, he said, pumping water to wash. I watched her in the paddock. Whatever you did, it worked. Clara felt a swell of pride that surprised her with its intensity. She's strong. She wanted to heal. She had help. Cal dried his hands on a rag and turned to face her. I meant what I said this morning about thanking you. I've spent 5 years trying to keep that horse alive, and you did in a week what I couldn't do in months. You kept her alive long enough for me to help. That counts for something. Cal's scarred face softened slightly. You're generous with credit. Most people aren't. Most people haven't had much reason to be generous with me. The silence that followed was comfortable in a way Clara hadn't expected. She returned to chopping vegetables while Cal leaned against the counter, watching her work with an expression that seemed almost peaceful. You could stay longer, he said abruptly. If you wanted, past the week. Clara's hand stilled on the knife. What? There's work, real work. The ranch needs a woman's hand in ways I haven't wanted to admit. Cooking, cleaning, tending the animals properly. I can pay you. Not much, but something. Enough to help with your father's debts, maybe. Cal's words came faster now, like he was afraid he'd lose his nerve. You'd have your own space, your own life. No obligations beyond the work. And you'd be away from that town, from those people who… Yes. Cal blinked. Yes? Yes, I'll stay. If you're serious about the offer, if this isn't charity, then yes, I'll stay. Clara set down the knife and faced him fully. But I need to go into town first. I need to see my father, make sure he's all right. I need to collect my things. And I need to tell Beau Weller to his face that his joke didn't work. A slow smile spread across Cal's face, transforming it into something almost handsome. That last part I'd like to see. Then come with me, tomorrow morning. We'll take the wagon, get my things, and be back before dark. Cal's smile faded. Clara, I haven't been to town in 5 years for good reason. People there are afraid of shadows and stories. Let them see the truth. Let them see that this beast of Ridgebreak is just a man trying to live his life, and that I'm choosing to be here. It might not stop Beau, but it'll make his lies harder to spread. Cal was quiet for a long moment, his gray eyes searching her face. Finally, he nodded. Tomorrow, then. But we go armed, and we don't stay longer than necessary. Agreed. That night, Clara lay awake in her small upstairs room, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling into darkness. Somewhere below, Cal moved through the house, his footsteps heavy and deliberate. She heard him pause outside her door, heard his breathing on the other side of the wood, heard him walk away without knocking. She wondered what he'd been about to say. Morning came cold and clear, the kind of dawn that promised heat later but started with a chill that made breath visible. Cal had the wagon ready, 2 horses hitched and restless, a rifle tucked under the seat within easy reach. He wore clean clothes, still rough workwear, but mended and cared for. His hair was pulled back, revealing more of his scarred face. Clara saw him brace himself, like a soldier preparing for battle. "Ready?" he asked. Clara climbed onto the wagon seat beside him. "Ready." The ride to Ashford Springs was nothing like the brutal walk Clara had made a week ago. The wagon moved steadily, the horses strong and well-fed. Cal drove in silence, his jaw set, his eyes scanning the horizon constantly. Clara found herself studying his profile, the sharp line of his nose, the way his scars caught the early light and turned silver. "You're staring," Cal said without looking at her. "I'm wondering what you're thinking." "I'm thinking that this is probably a mistake, but I'm doing it anyway because you asked me to." He glanced at her briefly. "I'm thinking that if anyone lays a hand on you, I'm going to forget every civilized impulse I've got left. No one's going to touch me. You'll be right there." "Exactly." They crested the rise that looked down on Ashford Springs, and Clara felt her stomach twist with familiar dread. The town spread out below them, small and mean in the morning light, already awake and moving. Smoke rose from chimneys. People moved between buildings. It looked harmless, ordinary, but Clara knew better. Cal must have felt her tension because his hand moved to cover hers on the seat between them. His touch was brief, careful, but it steadied her. "You don't have to prove anything to them," he said quietly. "Yes, I do. I have to prove it to myself." They drove down into town and Clara watched as people stopped to stare. Conversations cut off mid-word. Women grabbed their children and pulled them close. Men stepped back from the street. The fear was palpable, ridiculous, and Clara felt anger kindle in her chest. Cal pulled the wagon to a stop in front of Pritchard's general store, right in the center of town where everyone could see. He climbed down first, then offered Clara his hand with deliberate courtesy. She took it, letting him help her down, making sure everyone saw. Thomas Kirk was the first to approach, his face split in a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Well, well, look who made it back after all. We were starting to think old Cal had eaten you, Scarecrow." "My name is Clara Hensley," Clara said, her voice steady and clear. "And I'm here to collect my things. I'm moving to Ridgebreak Ranch to work as Mr. Donovan's housekeeper." The silence that fell over the street was absolute. Thomas's grin froze and shattered. Somewhere behind them, Clara heard a woman gasp. "You're what?" Thomas recovered enough to speak, but his voice had lost its mockery. "You heard her." Cal's voice was a low rumble. "Miss Hensley is in my employ now. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly." Bo Weller emerged from his father's bank like he'd been waiting for this moment. He was dressed in his usual expensive clothes, his golden hair perfect, his smile sharp as broken glass. "Clara." He said her name like he owned it. "What an interesting development. Tell me, did the Beast promise you $50 too, or has he found other ways to pay for your services?" Cal moved so fast, Clara barely saw it. One moment he was standing beside the wagon, the next he had Bo pressed against the bank wall, one massive hand wrapped around the younger man's throat. "Say that again," Cal growled. "I want to make sure I heard you right before I break every bone in your face." Bo's eyes bulged, his hands clawing at Cal's grip. People screamed. Someone ran for the sheriff. Clara stepped forward, her heart racing. "Cal, let him go." "He insulted you." "I know. Let him go anyway." Cal held Bo a moment longer, then released him with a shove that sent him stumbling. Bo doubled over, coughing and gasping, his perfect image shattered. "You'll regret this," Bo wheezed. "Both of you. My father—" "Your father doesn't scare me, and neither do you." Cal turned his back on Bo with deliberate contempt. "Clara, get what you need. I'll wait here." Clara walked toward her house on legs that shook slightly, aware of every eye on her back. She heard whispers starting, vicious and speculative, but she kept walking. Behind her, Cal stood beside the wagon like a sentinel, his presence a wall between her and the town's cruelty. Her father was awake when she entered, sitting at the table with a cup of something that definitely wasn't water. He looked up as she came in, his eyes bloodshot but aware. "Clara, girl, you're alive." "Of course I'm alive." Clara began gathering her few possessions. Extra dresses, her mother's medical kit, the small wooden box that held her mother's letters. "I came to tell you I'm leaving." "Leaving?" Robert stood unsteadily. "What do you mean, leaving?" "I have work, real work, at Ridgebreak Ranch. I'll send money when I can, enough to help with the debts." Clara kept her voice matter-of-fact, knowing that emotion would only make this harder. "Mrs. Chen will check on you. You need to stop drinking, Papa. You need to try." "With him? You're going to live with that monster?" Robert grabbed her arm, his grip weak but desperate. "Clara, the things people say are lies. All of it. He's not a monster. He's just a man who lost someone he loved and wants to be left alone." Clara gently removed her father's hand. "I know what I'm doing. Your mother would want me to survive, would want me to find somewhere I'm not Scarecrow." Clara's voice broke slightly on the nickname. "I can't stay here anymore, Papa. This town is killing me slowly, and I'm done letting it." Robert's face crumpled. For a moment, Clara saw the father he used to be, the one who'd carried her on his shoulders, who taught her to be brave. Then he reached for his bottle, and the moment passed. "Go then," he muttered. "Leave your old man to rot. Everyone else has." Clara wanted to say something that would fix this, that would make him understand, but she'd learned over the past 3 years that some things couldn't be fixed with words. She kissed his forehead, picked up her bag, and walked out of the house for the last time. Cal was still standing by the wagon, surrounded by a circle of empty space as townspeople gave him wide berth. When he saw Clara, relief flickered across his face. "All set?" he asked. Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. Cal took her bag and secured it in the wagon, then helped her up onto the seat. He was about to climb up himself when Sheriff Porter appeared, moving through the crowd with the kind of slow, deliberate authority that suggested he'd been watching and waiting. "Cal Donovan." The sheriff was a weathered man in his 50s, with gray in his beard and eyes that had seen too much. "Word is you just assaulted Bo Weller in broad daylight." "Word would be right," Cal said calmly. "He said something offensive about Miss Hensley here. I corrected his mistake." "By choking him?" "He's still breathing, isn't he? That shows remarkable restraint on my part." Porter's mouth twitched like he was fighting a smile. "Clara, you all right? You're going with this man of your own free will?" "Yes, Sheriff." Clara met his eyes directly. "Mr. Donovan has offered me employment. I've accepted. Anything else is town gossip and none of anyone's business." The sheriff studied them both for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Fair enough. Cal, I'd suggest you head home now, before Bo's daddy gets wind of this and decides to make it official." "I'll leave when I'm ready." "Then get ready fast." Porter's voice dropped lower. "Marcus Weller's been looking for an excuse to move on your land. Don't hand him one wrapped in a bow." Cal's jaw tightened, but he nodded. He climbed up onto the wagon seat and gathered the reins. "One more thing," Porter said, looking directly at Clara. "If you need help out there, if anything happens you don't like, you come to me. Understand?" Clara understood what he was really asking. "I will, but I won't need to." Porter tipped his hat and stepped back. Cal snapped the reins and the wagon began to move. As they rolled through town, Clara kept her back straight and her eyes forward, refusing to look at the faces that watched them go, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her afraid. They were almost clear of the town when hoofbeats thundered up behind them. Cal's hand moved toward the rifle, but Clara touched his arm. "Wait, that's not Bo." A young man on a gray horse pulled alongside the wagon, his face familiar, but his expression uncertain. Clara recognized him after a moment, Jace Mercer, one of Bo's usual crowd, the one who'd looked back with shame in his eyes. "Miss Hensley," Jace said breathlessly, "I need to talk to you. Both of you." Cal slowed the wagon, but didn't stop completely. "Make it quick. Bo's planning something. I don't know what exactly, but he's furious. He's been talking to his father, and there are men riding out to survey your land. They're saying the spring on your property is community water, that you don't have the right to control it." Jace's words tumbled out fast. "I thought you should know. Before they show up with lawyers and guns and make this official." "Why tell us?" Clara asked. "You're Bo's friend." "I was. Until I saw what that blank letter almost did to you. Until I realized that everything we've been doing, the jokes, the cruelty, it wasn't funny. It was evil." Jace looked ashamed. "I can't stop Bo, but I can at least warn you. Give you time to prepare." Cal studied the young man with narrowed eyes. "If this is a trick, it's not. I swear on my mother's grave, it's not." Jace's voice was desperate, sincere. "I just thought you deserved to know what's coming." "Then we appreciate the warning." Clara's voice was gentle. "Thank you, Jace." Jace nodded, pulled his horse around, and rode back toward town at a gallop. Cal watched him go, his expression unreadable. "Could be a trap," he said. "Could be. Or it could be one decent person trying to do the right thing. In my experience, decent people are rarer than gold. Then maybe we just found something valuable." Clara settled back against the seat. "Either way, we'll deal with it when it comes." They rode in silence the rest of the way home. Home. The word felt strange in Clara's mind, but not wrong. Ridgebreak Ranch appeared on the horizon like a promise, and Clara felt something in her chest loosen. They'd barely pulled into the yard when another horse appeared on the road behind them, this one ridden hard and fast. Cal grabbed the rifle and jumped from the wagon, but Clara recognized the rider immediately. "It's a woman," she said. "Alone." The rider was tall and elegant, even in a state of obvious agitation, her dark hair coming loose from its pins, her riding dress expensive and travel-stained. She pulled her horse to a stop and dismounted in one fluid motion, her eyes fixed on Cal with an intensity that bordered on fury. "You," she spat. "You have some nerve bringing a girl out here, parading her through town like some kind of—" "Iris!" Cal's voice was flat. "What are you doing here?" "Iris." The name clicked into place. Sarah's sister. Iris pointed at Clara without looking at Iris, pointed at Clara without looking at her. Sarah's been dead 5 years, and you already have some girl playing house in her kitchen. Miss Hensley is my employee, not that it's any of your business. Everything about this ranch is my business. Sarah left half of it to me in her will, or have you forgotten that detail? Cal's face went dangerously still. You gave up your claim when you married that banker in Fort Worth and moved away. You signed papers. I signed papers saying I wouldn't interfere, not that I didn't care what happened here. Iris finally looked at Clara, her eyes sharp and assessing. Who are you? Clara climbed down from the wagon, her legs steady despite her racing heart. Clara Hensley, I'm helping with the ranch work. Helping! Iris's laugh was bitter. Is that what they're calling it now? A skinny girl with desperate eyes, and Cal swoops in to rescue her. How noble. How convenient. That's enough. Cal's voice could have cut stone. You don't know anything about the situation. I know plenty. I know Bo Weller sent her out here as a joke. I know she's been living under your roof for a week. I know how that looks, Cal. How it'll be used against you. She's been healing Ember, Cal shot back. She saved Sarah's horse when I couldn't. So before you pass judgment, maybe get your facts straight. Iris's expression shifted, surprise flickering across her face. Ember's better? Come see for yourself. They walked to the barn in tense silence, Clara trailing slightly behind. When Iris saw Ember standing in her stall, healthy and alert, her entire demeanor changed. She rushed forward, her hands gentle on the mare's face, tears suddenly streaming down her cheeks. Oh, sweet girl, I thought we'd lost you too. She looked at Clara over Ember's neck. You did this? I helped, Clara said quietly. Cal did most of the work. Don't lie to protect him. He told me he couldn't fix her. Iris stroked Ember's mane, her voice thick with emotion. This horse is the last piece of my sister left in this world. Thank you for saving her. The gratitude was grudging but real. Clara nodded, not trusting herself to speak. They stood there in uncomfortable silence until Iris finally stepped back from the stall. I came to warn you, she said to Cal. Marcus Weller is moving against you. He's claiming the spring is public water, that your deed doesn't include water rights. He's got lawyers looking for technicalities. Let him look. My deed is solid. Your deed is 40 years old and written by a drunk clerk. Marcus has new lawyers with new ways of reading old laws. Iris crossed her arms. I'm telling you this because Sarah would have wanted me to. She loved this place. She wouldn't want the Wellers taking it. What do you suggest I do? Fight back. Get your own lawyer. Document everything. And for heaven's sake, be careful who you trust. Iris looked at Clara. No offense, but the timing of your arrival is suspicious. None taken, Clara said. If I were you, I'd be suspicious too. Iris blinked, clearly not expecting agreement. Well, at least you're honest. I try to be. Something passed between them then. Not friendship, not yet, but the beginning of understanding. Iris turned back to Cal. I'm staying at the boarding house in town for a few days. If you need anything, testimony, documentation, whatever, send word. I'll help if I can. Why? Cal's question was blunt. You haven't spoken to me in 5 years. Because Sarah loved you, and she loved this land, and I'm tired of letting grief make me cruel. Iris's voice softened. And because I misjudged you just now, and maybe I've been misjudging you for years. Maybe we all have. She left without waiting for a response, mounting her horse and riding back toward town at a more sedate pace than she'd arrived. Cal and Clara stood in the barn, watching her disappear down the road. That was unexpected, Clara said. Everything about today has been unexpected. Cal rubbed his face with both hands. You sure you still want to stay? This is about to get uglier. I'm sure. Clara said, I'm sure, Cal. Whatever's coming, we'll face it together. Cal looked at her for a long moment, his scarred face unreadable. Then he nodded slowly. Together. All right. But first thing tomorrow, we start preparing. We document the spring, check the property boundaries, make sure every animal is accounted for. If Weller wants a fight, we'll give him one. That night, they made plans over dinner. Cal pulled out old deed papers, yellowed and fragile. Clara took notes in careful handwriting, documenting dates and boundaries. They worked until the candles burned low and Clara's eyes stung with exhaustion. Go to bed, Cal said finally. We'll pick this up tomorrow. Clara stood, stretching muscles stiff from sitting. Cal? Thank you. For letting me stay, for defending me in town, for all of it. You're earning your keep, no thanks necessary. Still. Clara moved toward the stairs, then paused. We'll get through this. I know we will. She climbed the stairs before he could respond, but she felt his eyes on her back, steady and warm. Sleep came hard that night, Clara's mind racing with everything that had happened. She'd burned her bridges with Ashford Springs. She'd committed herself to this ranch, to this fight, to Cal. The weight of those decisions should have terrified her. Instead, she felt almost free. She was drifting into sleep when she heard it, the thunder of hoofbeats approaching fast, too many horses moving too quick for anything good. Clara rushed to the window and saw them in the moonlight. At least a dozen riders, carrying torches that turned them into demons made of fire and shadow. She ran downstairs, her bare feet loud on the wooden steps. Cal was already up, rifle in hand, his face grim. Get to the root cellar, he ordered. Hide. Don't come out no matter what you hear. Cal, there are too many chow. Now, Clara! The first torch hit the barn roof before she could argue. Flames caught and spread, hungry and fast. Ember screamed inside, and Clara heard the other animals panicking. The horses, she cried. Cal was already moving toward the barn. Clara ran after him, fear forgotten in the face of animals burning alive. They burst through the barn doors together into a nightmare of smoke and fire and terrified creatures. Cal went for the horses in the far stalls while Clara ran for Ember. The mare was wild with fear, rearing and kicking, but Clara's voice cut through the panic. Ember girl, easy now. We're getting you out, trust me. Please trust me. She got the stall door open and grabbed Ember's halter, pulling hard. The mare followed, stumbling and afraid but following. Clara led her out into the yard where smoke filled her lungs and made her eyes stream. Behind her, the barn was fully engulfed. Cal emerged leading two horses, his face black with soot, his clothes singed. He slapped them toward the open pasture and turned back for more. There's no time, Clara screamed, but Cal was already gone, swallowed by smoke and flame. The riders circled the yard, whooping and laughing. Bo Weller sat his horse at the front, torch in hand, his face demonic in the firelight. Come out, Donovan, he shouted. Come out, and we'll talk about terms. Cal emerged from the barn with the last horse just as the roof began to collapse. He drove the animal toward safety and turned to face Bo, rifle raised. You burned my barn. Why would I negotiate with you now? Because I have more torches. Because I have more men. Because I can burn everything you love until there's nothing left but ash. Bo's smile was vicious. Or you can sign over the water rights and walk away with your life. Go to hell. Bo raised his hand and his men lifted their torches. Clara saw it happening as if in slow motion, saw them preparing to throw, saw the house and the remaining outbuildings about to burn, saw everything Cal had built about to turn to nothing. She stepped forward into the firelight, placing herself between Cal and Bo's men. Stop, she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but something in it made them pause. Please, stop this. Bo laughed. Look at that. Scarecrow thinks she can save him. That's sweet. That's real sweet. He leveled his torch at her. Step aside, Clara. This doesn't concern you. It concerns everyone. That spring doesn't just water this ranch. It feeds the creek that runs through half the county. You dam it up or poison it or sell it to the highest bidder, and people die. Ranches fail. The whole territory suffers. Clara's voice grew stronger. Is that really what you want? To be the man who destroyed everything just to prove you could? I want what's mine. This was never yours. It was Sarah Donovan's, and she left it to her husband, and you have no right. Clara didn't see Bo move. One moment he was on his horse, the next he'd dismounted and grabbed her, his arm around her throat, something cold and hard pressed against her temple. A gun. I have every right, Bo hissed in her ear. I have the right of power, of money, of being willing to do what weak men won't, and right now I have you. Cal's rifle swung toward them, but Bo pressed the gun harder against Clara's head. Don't even think about it. You shoot me, my men burn everything. You try to negotiate, I shoot her. Your only option is to sign the papers I brought, turn over the water rights, and maybe, I let you both walk away from this. Clara met Cal's eyes across the burning yard. She saw rage there, and fear, and something else. A question. She gave the tiniest shake of her head. Don't surrender. Not for me. But Cal was already lowering the rifle. All right, he said, his voice hollow. You win. Give me the papers. Cal, no. Shut up, Clara. Cal's eyes never left Bo. Give me the papers. I'll sign. Just let her go. Bo's laugh was triumphant. He shoved Clara forward, and she stumbled into Cal's arms. He steadied her, his hands gentle despite their urgency. Get behind me, he whispered. One of Bo's men produced papers from his saddlebag and rode forward, offering them to Cal. Cal took them, his hands steady, and began to read by the light of the burning barn. That's when Clara saw it. Dust on the road, moving fast. Lots of dust, lots of horses. Bo saw it too. His smile faltered. What? The riders burst into the yard at full gallop, and Clara recognized Sheriff Porter at their head, followed by what looked like half the men from town. They surrounded Bo's gang with practiced efficiency, guns drawn, faces grim. Bo Weller, Porter's voice rang with authority. You and your men are under arrest for arson, assault, and attempted extortion. Drop your weapons, now. For a moment, everything hung in balance. Then one of Bo's men dropped his torch and raised his hands. Then another, then another. The gang fractured like rotten wood, each man choosing survival over loyalty. Only Bo held firm, his gun still drawn, his face twisted with fury. You can't do this. My father... Your father is the one who sent me. Seems Iris Vale rode into town with some interesting information about your activities tonight. Marcus Weller might be many things, but he's smart enough to know when to cut his losses. And you, boy, are officially a loss. Clara felt Cal's arms tighten around her as Bo's world collapsed. She watched understanding dawn on Bo's face, that his father had abandoned him, that his power was illusion, that he'd finally pushed too far. Bo raised his gun toward Cal one last time. Porter's shot rang out clean and true, hitting Bo's shoulder and spinning him around. The young man went down hard in the dirt, screaming, his gun flying from his hand. Porter dismounted and kicked the weapon away. Get him patched up and put him in a cell. The rest of you too. Move. The posse rounded up Bo's men with swift efficiency. Clara watched them go, her body shaking with delayed reaction. The barn burned behind them, but the house stood safe. The animals were scattered but alive. They'd survived. Porter approached them, his face grave. Cal, Clara, you both all right? We will be, Cal said. His arms were still around Clara, and he didn't seem inclined to let go. How did you know? Iris Vale came riding into town like hellfire itself, said Bo was planning something tonight. We got the men together as fast as we could. Porter looked at the burning barn and shook his head. I'm sorry we didn't get here sooner. You got here when it counted, Clara said. Thank you. Porter nodded, then hesitated. There's still the matter of the water rights. Marcus Weller's claim might not have legal standing, but he'll find another way to press it if he can. Let him try, Cal said. This land is mine, the water's mine, and I'm done being afraid of men who think power gives them permission to destroy. Fair enough. I'll need statements from both of you tomorrow. Come by the office when you can. Porter tipped his hat. Good night. And Clara? Your father's in my custody for now. Found him trying to join Bo's gang, drunk as a lord. I'll keep him safe until he sobers up. Clara felt her heart sink and rise simultaneously. Her father had tried to hurt them, but at least he was alive. At least there was still a chance. Thank you, Sheriff. Porter rode away with his prisoners, leaving Cal and Clara alone in the yard with the burning barn casting everything in shades of orange and gold. The fire was already dying down, having consumed most of what it could reach. By morning, there would be nothing left but ash and charred timber. Clara pulled away from Cal's arms and turned to face him. His face was black with soot, his clothes ruined, his eyes reflecting firelight. We lost the barn, she said. We saved the animals. We saved each other. We saved the land. Cal's voice was rough with smoke and emotion. The barn we can rebuild. We? Cal cupped her face with both hands, his touch gentle despite his size and strength. We, if you'll still stay after all this. Clara laughed, the sound slightly hysterical but real. After all this? Cal, I just faced down a man with a gun to my head. I'm not walking away because of a burned barn. You're remarkable, you know that? I'm terrified and exhausted, and I think I'm going to collapse any minute. But I'm staying. Cal pulled her close again, and they stood together while the barn burned itself to embers and the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns. Tomorrow would bring more challenges: rebuilding, testimony, dealing with the Wellers' lingering threat. But tonight, they'd survived. They'd won. And somewhere in the darkness, Ember nickered softly, calling them home to whatever came next. Dawn broke over the ruins with cruel clarity. What had been a solid barn the day before was now nothing but blackened timber and ash, smoke still rising in lazy spirals from the wreckage. Clara stood in the yard with a bucket of water, methodically dousing hot spots while Cal worked beside her in grim silence. They'd been at it since first light, both running on exhaustion and determination. "That's the last of it," Cal said, dropping his own bucket. His voice was hoarse from smoke. "It's out." Clara nodded, too tired to speak. Her hands were blistered from the bucket handle, her dress was ruined beyond salvaging, and every muscle in her body screamed protest. But the animals were safe in the hastily erected paddock, the house still stood, and they were alive. "Come on!" Cal touched her shoulder gently. "You need food and rest." Inside the kitchen, Clara slumped into a chair while Cal worked at the stove with mechanical efficiency. He set eggs and bacon in front of her, refilled her coffee cup, then sat down across from her with his own plate. They ate without speaking, too exhausted for words. The knock on the door came as Clara was finishing her second cup of coffee. Cal's hand moved to the rifle leaning against the wall, but Clara put her hand on his arm. "It's probably the sheriff. Like he said he'd come." It wasn't the sheriff. When Cal opened the door, Jace Mercer stood on the porch, hat in hand, his young face drawn and pale. "Mr. Donovan, Miss Hensley, I know I got no right to be here, but I need to talk to you both." Cal's expression was stone. "You've got 30 seconds before I throw you off my property." "I deserve that. I deserve worse." Jace's voice shook. "But I need you to know something first. About the spring. About what Bo was really planning." Clara stood and moved to the door. "Let him in, Cal, please." Cal stepped aside reluctantly. Jace entered the kitchen like a man walking to his execution, his eyes taking in their exhausted faces, the soot still streaking their skin. "I'm sorry," Jace said, "for all of it. For the blank letter, for every cruel thing we did, for not stopping Bo sooner. I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't rebuild a barn," Cal said flatly. "I know, but maybe this will help." Jace pulled a folded paper from his jacket. Bo didn't just want to control the spring, he was planning to poison it. The silence that fell was absolute. Clara felt ice flood her veins. "What?" Cal's voice was deadly quiet. "He had barrels of arsenic, was going to dump them into the underground caves that feed the spring, then offer to discover the poison and fix it in exchange for permanent water rights and a fortune from the territory." Jace's words tumbled out fast. He figured if the water was poisoned, people would be desperate enough to give him anything. And if you got blamed for it, even better. Clara's mind raced. "The caves. Where are they?" "North Ridge, about 2 miles from here. There's an entrance hidden in the rock face. Bo showed me once when he was drunk and bragging." Jace held out the paper. "I drew a map, best I could remember." Cal snatched the paper, studying it with fierce intensity. "Why tell us now? Why not before the fire?" "Because I'm a coward. Because I didn't think he'd actually go through with burning you out. Because I thought if I warned you once, that made me decent enough." Jace's voice broke. "But then I saw the barn burning and I realized I'm as guilty as he is. Every joke, every cruelty, every time I stood by and did nothing, I helped make him into this." "Where's the arsenic now?" Clara asked. "Stored in Marcus Weller's warehouse under lock and key. But Bo had another contact, someone willing to move it to the caves for the right price. I don't know who." Jace met Clara's eyes. "I'm testifying against him. Against all of them. Sheriff Porter's got me under protection until the trial. I just wanted you to know about the spring before anything else could happen." Cal folded the map carefully. "This doesn't make us even. Doesn't make you innocent. I know, but maybe it's a start." Jace backed toward the door. "I'll go now. But if you need anything, testimony, help finding the caves, whatever, you send word. I owe you that much and more." He left before either of them could respond. Through the window, Clara watched him ride away, his shoulders hunched like he was carrying the weight of his guilt physically. "Do you believe him?" she asked. "About the arsenic?" "Yeah. It's exactly the kind of twisted plan Bo would come up with." Cal spread the map on the table. "We need to find those caves. Need to make sure there's no poison already there." "I'm going with you." "Clara, don't argue. You need someone watching your back, and I know how to identify poison. My mother taught me." Clara's voice was firm. "We do this together, or not at all." Cal studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Together. But we go armed, and we're careful. If Bo's contact is still planning to move that arsenic, we might be walking into trouble." They prepared quickly, filling canteens, packing food, checking weapons. Cal saddled 2 horses from the ones they'd saved, and they set out north across the ranch land as the sun climbed higher in the cloudless sky. The ride took them through territory Clara had never seen, past the cultivated fields and into wilder country where rock outcroppings broke through the earth like bones. Cal rode in silence, his eyes scanning constantly, one hand never far from his rifle. After an hour, they reached the North Ridge. Cal consulted Jace's map, then pointed to a cluster of boulders. "Should be through there." They dismounted and tied the horses in the shade of a scrubby mesquite tree. Cal led the way through the rocks, moving with surprising grace for his size. Clara followed, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. The cave entrance was exactly where Jace had marked it, a narrow split in the rock face, partially hidden by brush and shadow. Cool air breathed out of the darkness, carrying the smell of damp stone and earth. Cal lit a lantern he'd brought and held it up, illuminating rough stone walls that disappeared into blackness. "Stay close. Watch your footing." They entered the cave together, the temperature dropping immediately. The passage was narrow at first, forcing them to move single file, then opened into a larger chamber. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness, echoing strangely. The lantern light caught on mineral deposits that glittered like stars. "There," Clara pointed to the far side of the chamber. 3 wooden barrels sat stacked against the wall, their sides marked with a skull and crossbones. Cal approached them carefully, examining the seals. "Unopened," he said. "Still sealed. They haven't dumped it yet." Clara moved closer, studying the barrels with the knowledge her mother had given her. "These are old. The seals are cracking. If they'd left them here much longer, the poison might have leaked on its own." "Intentional or incompetence?" "Does it matter? Either way, it would have destroyed the spring." Clara looked around the chamber, noting where water seeped through the walls, where it pooled and disappeared into cracks. "This chamber feeds directly into the underground aquifer. Poison here would spread through the entire system within days." Cal's jaw tightened. "We need to move these barrels out. Get them somewhere safe until Porter can collect them as evidence." They worked carefully, mindful of the cracking seals and the deadly contents. Cal lifted each barrel while Clara guided him through the narrow passage, both of them sweating despite the cool air. It took 3 trips to move all the barrels outside, and by the time they finished, the sun was past its zenith. Cal stood guard over the barrels, while Clara made sure the cave showed no signs of contamination. She checked the water pools, examined the rock for staining, and finally declared it clean. "We got lucky," she said, emerging into the sunlight. "Another week, and those seals would have failed. Luck had nothing to do with it. You figured it out. Jace found his conscience. We acted." Cal looked at the barrels with barely controlled fury. But the fact that Bo even thought of this, that Marcus Weller had this poison just sitting in his warehouse. "We stop them now," Clara interrupted. "We get this evidence to the sheriff, we testify, and we make sure they can't hurt anyone ever again." They were loading the barrels onto a travois Cal had improvised when they heard it, hoofbeats approaching fast. Multiple riders. Cal's rifle came up instantly. "Get behind the rocks!" But the riders crested the ridge before Clara could move, and she recognized the lead horse immediately. Iris Vale rode at the head of a group that included Sheriff Porter, Marcus Weller himself, and 6 armed men. Porter raised his hand in a gesture of peace. "Cal, Clara, we're not here for trouble. Mr. Weller has something to say." Marcus Weller dismounted slowly. He was an older man, silver-haired and distinguished, with the kind of face that had been handsome once and was now simply hard. He approached the barrels, saw the skull and crossbones marking, and his expression went ashen. "Where did you find these?" "In the caves, where your son was planning to dump them." Cal's voice was ice. "Where they would have poisoned every water source in the territory." Marcus's hands shook as he examined the barrels. "I knew he'd taken them from my warehouse. I hoped he'd just stolen them to sell. Some scheme for quick money." He looked up at Cal, and his face was the picture of a man watching his entire world crumble. "I didn't know about this. I swear on everything I hold sacred, I didn't know he planned this." "Your oath means nothing to me," Cal said. "I understand that, but it matters to the law." Marcus turned to Porter. "I'm prepared to testify against my son, fully and completely, and I'm withdrawing any and all claims to this land and its water rights. Cal Donovan's deed is legitimate. The spring is his, now and forever." The words hung in the air like a verdict. Clara watched Cal's face, saw the war of emotions playing across it: satisfaction, suspicion, grief for the son Marcus had lost even before the trial. "Why now?" Cal asked. "Why suddenly grow a conscience?" "Because Iris showed me what Bo has become. Because I saw the barn burning and realized my ambition created a monster." Marcus's voice cracked. "Because I failed as a father, and I won't compound that by failing as a man. You have my word, Donovan. The fight ends here." Porter stepped forward. "I'll need to take these barrels as evidence, and I'll need detailed statements from all of you about where they were found and in what condition." "You'll have them," Clara said, "but there's something else. Bo had a contact, someone who was supposed to move the poison for him. That person is still out there." "We'll find them," Porter promised. "Bo's talking now, trying to cut a deal. He'll give up names to save his neck." They spent the next hour giving statements, documenting the cave location, and watching as Porter's men carefully loaded the barrels onto a wagon. Marcus Weller stood apart from everyone, looking like a man who'd aged 10 years in a single day. Iris approached Clara while the men were working. "I owe you an apology," she said without preamble. "I judged you harshly, assumed the worst. I was wrong. You were protecting Sarah's memory. I understand that. Sarah would have liked you." Iris's smile was sad. She always had a soft spot for strays and fighters. "You're both. I'm trying to be more than that." "You already are." Iris glanced at Cal, who was talking with Porter. "He's different with you here. Lighter somehow. Less like a man buried alive." Clara didn't know how to respond to that, so she simply nodded. The group finally dispersed, Marcus riding back to town alone, his shoulders bowed with shame. Porter promised to send word when the trial date was set. Iris squeezed Clara's hand before mounting her horse. "Come visit me sometime," she said. "We can talk about Sarah, about the ranch, about keeping stubborn men from destroying themselves." "I'd like that." Cal and Clara rode back to Ridgebreak in the golden afternoon light, exhausted but victorious. They'd found the poison, secured the evidence, and ended the Wellers' threat. It should have felt like triumph. Instead, Clara felt a creeping sense of unease she couldn't explain. They were unsaddling the horses when Cal suddenly went rigid. "Clara, don't move, don't make a sound." Clara froze. "What?" "Someone's in the house." Cal had heard something Clara couldn't, some sound, some instinct warning him. He moved toward the house with silent purpose, rifle ready. Clara followed despite his warning gesture, unwilling to let him face whatever waited alone. The kitchen was empty. The living room showed no signs of disturbance. But when they climbed the stairs, Clara saw it. Her bedroom door standing open when she'd closed it that morning. Cal pushed her behind him and entered the room fast and low. For a moment, Clara thought it was empty. Then she saw the figure huddled in the corner by her bed. Her father. Robert Hensley looked up with wild, bloodshot eyes. He held a pistol in shaking hands, pointing it at nothing and everything. "Papa." Clara's voice came out as a whisper. "What are you doing here?" "I came to save you." Robert's words slurred together. "From him. From the monster. Porter let me go, and I came to save you." "I don't need saving, Papa. Put the gun down. He's corrupted you, turned you against your own family, against the town." Robert's eyes fixed on Cal with hatred fueled by alcohol and fear. "I should have done this when you first took her. Should have protected her like I failed to protect her mother. Cal raised his rifle slowly. Mr. Hensley, you're drunk and you're not thinking clearly. Put the weapon down and we can talk. Don't tell me what to do, monster! Robert lurched to his feet, the pistol wavering. I know what you are. Everyone knows. You killed your wife and now you're going to kill my daughter. Papa, that's not true. Clara moved toward him, hands outstretched. Cal didn't kill Sarah. She died of fever, and he's not going to hurt me. Lies. All lies. He's poisoned your mind. The only poison here is what you're drinking. Clara took another step. Please, Papa, I love you. I know you're hurting. I know you miss Mama, but this isn't the way. She wouldn't want this. Robert's voice broke on a sob. Your Mama wouldn't want you living in sin with a killer. She'd be ashamed. The words hit Clara like a physical blow, but she kept her voice steady. Mama would want me to survive, to be happy, to have a home where I'm not Scarecrow anymore. Tears streamed down her face now. She'd want you to stop drinking, to be the father you used to be, the one who taught me to be brave. Something flickered in Robert's eyes. Recognition, maybe, or memory of who he used to be. The pistol lowered slightly. I can't stop, he whispered. I've tried. Without her, I can't. You can. With help, you can. Cal and I will help you, but you have to put the gun down first. Robert looked at the pistol in his hand like he'd forgotten it was there. His face crumpled. I'm so sorry, Clara girl. I'm so sorry for everything. The gun clattered to the floor. Robert collapsed, sobbing, all his anger and bravado dissolving into the grief he'd been drowning for 3 years. Clara rushed to him, gathering him in her arms while he shook with anguish. Cal lowered his rifle and quietly picked up Robert's pistol, emptying it with efficient movements. Then he stepped out of the room, giving them privacy. Clara held her father while he cried himself sober, whispering the same words her mother used to say when Clara woke from nightmares. It's all right. I've got you. You're safe now. It's all right. When Robert finally quieted, his voice was rough but clearer. I really messed this up, didn't I? You made mistakes. We all have. I wanted to protect you. Instead, I almost... He couldn't finish the sentence. But you didn't. You stopped. You chose to stop. Clara helped him sit up, brushing his wild hair back from his face. Papa, you're sick. The drinking, the grief, it's made you sick. But there's a place in Fort Worth, a hospital that helps people like you. Iris Vale told me about it. They can help you get better. I don't deserve help. Everyone deserves help. Mama taught me that too. Robert looked at his daughter with eyes that were finally seeing her clearly. When did you grow up to be so wise? When I had to. Clara managed a watery smile. Will you go? To Fort Worth. Will you try? If you'll come visit me. If you'll forgive an old fool. I'll visit. And I already forgive you. They sat together in silence for a while, Clara holding her father's hand, both of them grieving what had been lost and hoping for what might still be saved. Cal appeared in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral. Sheriff's here. Someone in town saw Robert heading this way and sent word. Robert stood on shaking legs. I'll go peacefully. Tell Porter I'll go peacefully. Tell him yourself. Cal stepped aside to let Robert pass, but caught Clara's arm gently. You all right? Clara nodded, though she felt wrung out and hollow. I will be. Downstairs, Porter waited with Iris Vale beside him. When they saw Robert's state, understanding passed between them. I'll make the arrangements, Iris said quietly to Clara, for the hospital in Fort Worth. He can go as soon as the judge approves it, in lieu of jail time. Thank you. Clara's voice was barely a whisper. Robert allowed himself to be led outside without resistance. At the door, he turned back to Clara. I love you, girl. I'm sorry I forgot how to show it. I love you too, Papa. Get better. She watched from the porch as they rode away, her father sitting slumped on Porter's horse, looking smaller and older than she'd ever seen him. Iris promised to send word about the arrangements and left with a sympathetic squeeze of Clara's shoulder. Then it was just Cal and Clara standing in the ruins of the day's chaos, the burned barn smoking gently behind them. Hell of a day, Cal said finally. Clara laughed, the sound slightly hysterical. That's one way to put it. You should eat. Rest. You've been through... Cal! Clara turned to face him. Stop trying to fix everything. Just be here with me for a minute. So he did. They stood together on the porch as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold. The ranch was damaged but not destroyed. The threats had been neutralized but not forgotten. Her father was getting help, but the road ahead would be long and uncertain. But Clara wasn't alone anymore. That counted for something. We should check on Ember, Cal said eventually. Make sure all this chaos didn't set her back. They walked to the paddock together, and Ember nickered when she saw them, trotting over with only the slightest hitch in her stride. Cal stroked her nose while Clara examined the healed leg, marveling at how far the mare had come. She's going to be fine, Clara said. Strong as ever. Like someone else I know. Clara looked up to find Cal watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. I'm not strong. I'm terrified half the time. Strength isn't not being afraid. It's being afraid and doing what needs doing anyway. Cal's scarred hand covered hers on Ember's neck. You faced down armed men, saved animals from fire, talked your father down from violence, all in the span of 24 hours. That's strength, Clara. I just did what anyone would. No. Most people would have run, would have given up, would have let fear win. His gray eyes held hers. You're remarkable. I need you to know that. Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. Cal. Whatever she was going to say was cut off by the sound of a gunshot. The bullet hit the porch post behind them, sending splinters flying. Cal tackled Clara to the ground, covering her body with his as another shot rang out. Then another. Through the dust, Clara saw him. Bo Weller, stumbling across the yard on foot, his shoulder bandaged from Porter's shot but his good hand steady on a pistol. His face was contorted with rage and desperation. You took everything, Bo screamed. My father, my future, my life. You took everything. Cal tried to reach for his rifle, but it was back at the house. They were exposed, defenseless. Bo raised the pistol, aiming directly at Clara. She started this. She ends it. The shot echoed across the ranch. But it didn't come from Bo's gun. Bo looked down in confusion at the red stain spreading across his chest. He turned slowly and saw Robert Hensley standing 20 feet away, Porter's rifle smoking in his hands. Robert had circled back, had been watching from the shadows, waiting. Not my daughter, Robert said quietly. Never my daughter. Bo fell to his knees, then forward into the dust. Porter and his men thundered into the yard seconds later, too late to prevent the shooting, but in time to see its aftermath. Cal helped Clara to her feet, both of them shaking. Porter dismounted and went to Bo, checking for a pulse. After a long moment, he shook his head. Robert lowered the rifle, his face blank with shock. I killed him. I killed a man. You saved 2 lives, Porter said firmly. Bo escaped custody an hour ago. We've been tracking him. This was self-defense and protection of others. No jury in the territory would convict you. Clara ran to her father, wrapping her arms around him. You saved us, Papa. You saved us. Robert held her with shaking arms, and Clara felt something shift in him. Not healing, not yet, but the first crack in the wall he'd built between himself and the world. The rest of the day passed in a blur of statements, official questions, and the grim business of dealing with Bo's body. Marcus Weller came to collect his son's remains, his face a mask of anguish and acceptance. He spoke briefly with Robert, thanked him quietly, and left without further words. By the time darkness fell, everyone had gone except Iris, who'd stayed to make sure Clara and Cal were all right. She sat at their kitchen table, helping Clara prepare a simple meal while Cal stood watch at the window, still too wired to relax. This is really over now, Iris said, more statement than question. I think so, Clara replied. Bo's dead. Marcus has withdrawn his claims. The poison is secured. What else could happen? With this family? I've learned never to ask that question, but Iris smiled as she said it. Still, I think you might actually get some peace now, both of you. She left after dinner, promising to return in a few days to check on them. Robert would be transported to Fort Worth in the morning under medical supervision rather than arrest. The trial that would have been Bo's would now focus on his co-conspirators, with Jace's testimony and the recovered poison as evidence. Finally, Cal and Clara were alone in the quiet house. They sat in the kitchen, too exhausted to move, while night settled around the ranch like a protective blanket. I keep thinking I should say something profound, Cal said, after everything that's happened. Some wise words to make sense of it all. I don't need wise words. I just need to know. Clara paused, gathering courage. Is this real? This life, this place? Us working together? Or am I going to wake up tomorrow and find out it was all another cruel joke? Cal reached across the table and took her hand, his touch warm and solid and undeniably real. It's real, Clara. All of it. You're here because I want you here, because this ranch needs you, because I... He stopped, struggling with words. Because I haven't felt alive in 5 years, and then you walked into my barn half dead with a blank letter, and somehow everything changed. Claire's throat tightened with emotion. I was so scared that first day. Scared you'd hurt me. Scared you'd send me away. Scared I'd die on that walk back to town. I'm glad you stayed. So am I. They sat in comfortable silence, hands joined across the table, while the house settled around them. Outside, Ember moved in the paddock, content and healing. The burned barn stood as a reminder of what they'd survived. The land stretched out under starlight, vast and full of possibility. Tomorrow, they'd start rebuilding. Tomorrow, they'd face whatever came next. But tonight, for this one stolen moment of peace, they had everything they needed. Each other, the land, and the hard-won knowledge that they were strong enough to survive whatever storms might come. The joke had ended. The life was just beginning. 3 weeks passed in a rhythm that felt almost too peaceful to trust. Clara woke each morning to the sound of Cal already working, the ranch alive with the business of rebuilding. They'd cleared the burned barn's remains, salvaged what timber could be saved, and begun the slow process of constructing something new. The work was hard, and the days were long, but Clara found herself grateful for the exhaustion that let her sleep without dreams. Her father had been gone for 2 weeks now, installed in the Fort Worth hospital under Iris's arrangements. The letters he sent were brief and shaky, written in a hand that struggled to stay steady, but they came regularly. Each one a small promise that he was trying. The trial of Bo's co-conspirators had been set for the following month. Jace Mercer had kept his word, providing detailed testimony that implicated 3 other men in the poisoning scheme. Marcus Weller had testified as well, his grief-stricken confession carrying the weight of a father's failure. The town was still reeling from the revelations, and Clara noticed that when she went into Ashford Springs now, people looked away rather than mocking her. She wasn't sure if it was respect or shame, but either way, the nickname Scarecrow had died with Bo. On a morning that started like any other, Clara was in the chicken coop collecting eggs when she heard the horses. Her body tensed automatically, muscle memory from too many dangerous arrivals, but when she stepped outside, she saw Iris riding up the path alone, her posture relaxed. "Morning," Iris called out, dismounting with practiced ease. "Is Cal around?" "In the new barn. We got the frame up yesterday." Clara wiped her hands on her apron. "Everything all right?" "Better than all right. I have news." Iris's smile was genuine. "But I want you both to hear it." They found Cal measuring timber, his shirt dark with sweat despite the early hour. He looked up when they approached, wariness flickering across his face before he recognized Iris. "More trouble?" he asked, setting down his tools. "The opposite, actually." Iris pulled a folded document from her saddlebag. "The territorial judge reviewed Marcus Weller's withdrawal of his claim to your water rights. It's official now. Signed, sealed, and legally binding. No one can challenge your ownership of this land or the spring ever again." Cal took the document with careful hands, his eyes scanning the legal language. Clara watched his face transform as understanding sank in, the tension he'd carried for years slowly releasing. "It's really over," he said quietly. "It's really over." Iris turned to Clara. "And I have news for you, too. Your father's doctor sent word. Robert's made significant progress. He's stayed sober for 13 days straight. They're cautiously optimistic about his recovery." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. 13 days. That's the longest since Mama died. He's fighting for it. For you. Iris squeezed Clara's hand. "The doctor thinks another month in the hospital, then he can come home. Under supervision, with continued treatment, but home. Home where? Clara asked. Our old house was... He can stay here, Cal interrupted. Both women turned to stare at him. He shifted uncomfortably under their scrutiny. If he wants... If Clara wants, there's room. The ranch could use another pair of hands, someone with carpentry skills. Once he's well enough. Clara's throat tightened with emotion. You'd do that? After he threatened you? He was sick and scared and trying to protect his daughter. I understand that. Cal met her eyes. Besides, you can't rebuild a family from a distance. If he's getting better, he should be somewhere he can see that you're safe and happy. Might help him stay that way. Iris smiled knowingly. You're a better man than this territory deserves, Cal Donovan. Don't spread that around. I've got a reputation to maintain. They shared coffee on the porch while Iris caught them up on town news. The general store had changed ownership. 2 new families had moved in from the east. Thomas Kirk had left Ashford Springs entirely, unable to face the shame of his association with Beau. The town was healing, slowly, from the poison that had infected it. Iris left before noon, promising to return the following week with updates on Robert's progress. Cal and Clara returned to work on the barn, moving in the comfortable silence they'd developed over weeks of shared labor. But as the afternoon sun climbed higher, Clara noticed Cal growing increasingly distracted. He measured the same board 3 times, made a cut he had to redo, and finally threw down his tools with unusual force. I can't concentrate, he muttered. What's wrong? Cal was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the land stretching away toward the horizon. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. I keep waiting for it to be taken away. The peace. The security. You. He turned to face her. For 5 years I've lived with loss, got used to it. Built my whole life around expecting nothing good to last. And now everything's changing so fast I don't know how to trust it. Clara set down her own tools and moved closer. I feel the same way sometimes, like I'm waiting for someone to tell me this was all a mistake, that I don't belong here. You belong here more than anyone. Cal's intensity startled her. This ranch was dying before you came. I was dying, even if I was too stubborn to admit it. You brought everything back to life. We brought it back together. Clara, I need to tell you something. I've been trying to find the right words for weeks, but there might not be right words, so I'm just going to say it. Cal took a deep breath. When Sarah died, I thought that was it for me. Thought I'd used up my share of happiness, and the rest was just surviving until I didn't have to anymore. But then you walked into my barn with your blank letter and your stubborn courage, and you changed everything. Claire's heart hammered against her ribs. Cal, let me finish, please. His scarred hands reached for hers, holding them gently. I know it hasn't been long. I know people will talk. I know there's your father to think about and 100 practical reasons to wait. But I also know that I don't want to spend another day pretending you're just my housekeeper when you're so much more than that. What are you saying? I'm saying I love you. I'm saying that somewhere between healing Ember and rebuilding this ranch and facing down men with guns, you became the reason I wake up wanting to live instead of just survive. Cal's voice shook slightly. I'm saying I want you to stay. Not as an employee, not as a guest, as my wife, as my partner, as the person I build the rest of my life with. The world seemed to stop spinning. Clara stared at him, this massive, scarred man who'd been painted as a monster but was actually the gentlest soul she'd ever known. Tears spilled down her cheeks. You're crying, Cal said, concern flooding his face. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have... I'm crying because I love you too, you impossible man. Clara laughed through her tears. I've been in love with you for weeks and terrified to admit it because I thought you were still mourning Sarah and I was just convenient and useful and... Cal pulled her close, silencing her rambling with the simple act of holding her. Clara wrapped her arms around him and let herself believe it was real. All of it. The safety, the home, the love. Sarah would have liked you, Cal murmured into her hair. She always said I needed someone who wouldn't let me hide from the world. Someone brave enough to see past the scars. I see the scars. I just see everything else, too. They stood there in the afternoon sunlight, 2 broken people who'd found a way to be whole together, until Clara finally pulled back enough to look up at him. Yes, she said simply. Cal blinked. Yes? Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll stay. Yes to all of it. Clara smiled through her tears. But we do this right. We tell my father when he's well enough. We let people see that this is real and honest, and we build something that lasts. I can do that. Cal's smile transformed his face. Though, fair warning, I don't know much about weddings or romance or any of that. Good thing I don't need any of that. I just need you. The kiss that followed was gentle and careful and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both slightly dazed, Clara noticed the sun beginning its descent toward the western horizon. We should get back to work, she said reluctantly. Work can wait. Cal kept his arm around her waist. Let's just stand here a minute longer and be happy. So they did. The weeks that followed were full of building, not just the barn, but a life. Cal and Clara worked side by side during the days, their conversations ranging from the practical to the profound. In the evenings, they sat on the porch and talked about the future, about expanding the herd, about what kind of wedding they wanted, about the children they might have someday, running wild across the ranch land. Clara wrote to her father about the engagement, her letter careful and honest. His response came faster than usual, written in a steadier hand than before. He gave his blessing with words that made Clara weep, apologizing for his failures, expressing gratitude for Cal's kindness, promising to be the father she deserved when he came home. The new barn rose slowly but surely, its frame solid and true. Cal taught Clara the carpentry skills her father had never gotten around to showing her, and she proved to be a quick study. Neighbors who'd once avoided ridge breaks started stopping by to offer help or supplies, the town's guilt manifesting in small acts of restitution. Iris became a regular visitor, bringing news and gossip, and slowly becoming the family Clara had lost when her mother died. She shared stories about Sarah that helped Clara understand the woman whose loss had shaped so much of Cal's life. Far from feeling like a replacement, Clara felt herself being welcomed into a legacy of strong women who'd loved this land. 6 weeks after Cal's proposal, on a morning bright with autumn promise, Robert Hensley came home. The man who stepped down from the wagon was thinner than Clara remembered, his hands still occasionally shaking, his face lined with new wrinkles. But his eyes were clear, truly clear, for the first time in 3 years. Papa. Clara met him in the yard, suddenly shy. Robert opened his arms and she walked into them like she was 12 years old again. Clara, girl, I've missed you. I've missed you too. Cal approached slowly, giving them space but present. Robert pulled back from Clara and extended his hand to Cal. Mr. Donovan, I owe you an apology that words can't really cover. For the threats, for the violence, for everything. Cal shook his hand firmly. You were sick. You got help. You're here now doing better. That's what matters. Still, I want you to know I see how you look at my daughter, how she looks at you, and I'm grateful she found someone who'll protect her the way I failed to. She doesn't need much protecting. Your daughter's stronger than both of us combined. Robert laughed, and the sound was rusty but genuine. That she is. That she is. They showed Robert to the room they'd prepared for him, small but comfortable, with a window overlooking the eastern pasture. Clara had filled it with small touches. A quilt her mother had made, his old tools cleaned and displayed, fresh flowers on the dresser. Robert stood in the doorway, overcome. I don't deserve this kindness. Nobody deserves kindness, Papa. We just give it anyway. Clara kissed his cheek. Welcome home. Over the following days, Robert settled into ranch life with the careful determination of a man rebuilding himself from the foundation up. He worked on small carpentry projects, his hands slowly remembering their old skill. He attended meetings in town for people struggling with drink, facing his demons with the same courage he'd once shown defending his daughter. He built a relationship with Cal based on mutual respect and the shared love of the woman they both wanted to protect. The trial of Beau's co-conspirators concluded with convictions across the board. Jace Mercer's testimony proved decisive, and the young man who'd found his conscience too late was granted immunity in exchange for his cooperation. Marcus Weller sold his bank and most of his holdings, donating a significant portion to establish a fund for widows and orphans in the territory. It wouldn't bring his son back or undo the damage, but it was something. On a cool November morning, with the sky brilliant blue and the air crisp with the promise of winter, Clara Hensley married Cal Donovan. The ceremony was held on the ranch under the cottonwood tree where Sarah was buried, with Sarah's sister Iris standing as witness and Robert walking Clara down an aisle marked by wildflowers. Sheriff Porter officiated, his weathered face creased in a genuine smile. The guests were few. Jace Mercer, trying to rebuild his reputation through honest work and quiet restitution. A handful of neighbors who'd learned that the Beast of Ridgebreak was just a good man who wanted to be left in peace. And Mrs. Chen, Clara's old neighbor, who wept through the entire ceremony. Clara wore a simple dress that Iris had helped her sew, white cotton with blue embroidery. Cal wore clean work clothes and had trimmed his wild hair, though he'd kept it long enough to tie back. They spoke their vows in steady voices, promising partnership and honesty and love for however long they both should live. When Porter pronounced them married, Cal kissed Clara with a gentleness that made several guests weep. Then they turned to face their small gathering, and Clara saw nothing but acceptance and joy. No mockery, no cruelty, no jokes. The reception was held in the newly completed barn, its fresh timber still fragrant with sawdust and promise. Robert had built tables and benches, his carpentry skills returning stronger than before. Iris had organized food, roasted chicken, fresh bread, vegetables from the ranch garden that Clara had planted and tended. Someone produced a fiddle, and there was dancing. Clara danced with her father, his steps uncertain but his smile sure. She danced with Cal, who claimed to have no rhythm but moved with surprising grace. She even danced with Jace, who apologized again for his part in sending her to the ranch. "If you hadn't sent me here, none of this would have happened," Claire said, gesturing to the celebration around them. "So maybe it wasn't entirely bad." "That's generous of you." "I've learned a lot about forgiveness lately, about how holding on to anger just weighs you down." Clara smiled. "You're trying to do better. That counts for something." As the sun set and the stars emerged, the guests gradually departed. Robert retired to his room, tired but content. Iris hugged them both and promised to visit the following week. Finally, it was just Cal and Clara standing in the yard of their ranch, married and exhausted and happier than either had dared to hope. "We did it," Clara said, leaning against Cal's solid warmth. "We did." Cal wrapped his arms around her from behind. "How does it feel to be Mrs. Donovan?" "Right. It feels right." Clara turned in his arms to face him. "Everything we've been through, the blank letter, the fire, all of it, led here, to this moment, to us." "You really believe that? That it all meant something?" "I have to. Otherwise it was just cruelty and chaos. But if it was a path to this, to finding you, to building this life, then maybe it was worth it." Cal rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Clara Donovan. I love you too, Cal. Forever." They stood there under the stars while Ember nickered softly from her paddock, and the wind whispered through the grass, and the land they'd fought so hard to protect stretched out around them in the darkness. This ranch that had nearly been lost. This love that had grown from desperation and determination. This life they'd built from the ashes of everything that had tried to destroy them. Inside the house, a lamp still burned in Robert's window, a father reclaiming sobriety one day at a time, finding purpose in the small carpentry projects that rebuilt his confidence along with the ranch. In town, Iris slept peacefully, having found family again after years of grief-stricken isolation. At the county jail, men who'd chosen cruelty over kindness served time for their crimes, while Jace worked honest jobs and tried to become someone his younger self would have been proud of. The world kept turning. The stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns. And at Ridgebreak Ranch, two people who'd been broken by life found wholeness in each other. 3 months later, on a morning brilliant with early spring sunshine, Clara woke to find Cal already gone from their bed. She found him in the east pasture, standing perfectly still, watching something. She approached quietly and saw what had captured his attention. Ember stood in the center of the pasture, her red coat gleaming, her previously injured leg showing no trace of a limp. And beside her, wobbly and uncertain but unmistakably alive, stood a newborn foal. "When?" Clara whispered, coming to stand beside Cal. "Must have been during the night. I came out to check on her and found them like this." Cal's voice was thick with emotion. "She hid it well. I didn't even know she was carrying," The foal was the color of burnt copper, with a white star on its forehead identical to embers. As they watched, it took its first uncertain steps, legs tangling comically before finding their coordination. "New life," Clara said softly. "On the ranch. It's a good sign." "More than a sign. It's a promise." Cal pulled Clara close. "That things can heal. That what we thought was lost can come back in new forms. That there's always hope, even when everything seems darkest." They stood together watching the mare and her foal, this unexpected gift, this tangible proof that endings could become beginnings, the ranch that had nearly burned, the love that had grown from a cruel joke, the family being rebuilt from scattered pieces. Clara thought about the girl who'd walked 5 miles through brutal heat with a blank letter and $50 worth of desperate hope. That girl had been called Scarecrow, had been mocked and broken and sent to die for entertainment. That girl had believed she deserved nothing better than cruelty. She was gone now. In her place stood Clara Donovan, wife and rancher and healer, surrounded by love and purpose, and the solid proof that courage could transform everything. "We should name the foal," Cal said. "What about hope?" Cal smiled. "Hope. I like that." And so they did. Hope, who would grow strong and fast under their care. Hope, who would run across the ranch land with the same wild joy her mother once had. Hope, who represented everything they'd fought for and everything they'd won. The sun climbed higher, warming the spring air, and Cal and Clara returned to the house to wake Robert and share the news. There was breakfast to make and work to be done and a life to live. The ordinary, extraordinary life they'd earned through fire and fear and the stubborn refusal to let cruelty have the final word. The joke had ended the moment Clara stepped into Cal's barn. Everything after was real. The hard work and the healing, the love found in unexpected places. The family built from broken pieces. The ranch that stood strong against all attempts to destroy it. Years later, when people asked how they'd met, Cal would tell the story of the blank letter with a mixture of anger and gratitude. Anger at the cruelty that sent Clara to him, gratitude that she came anyway. Clara would add that sometimes the worst things led to the best outcomes, that poison could become medicine, that a joke designed to destroy her had instead delivered her to the one place she truly belonged. And together they'd tell their children, eventually there would be 3, all strong and brave and taught to be kind, that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was walking 5 miles through the heat when you knew it might be a trap. It was staying when everyone expected you to run. It was choosing to trust and love and build, even when the world gave you every reason to surrender. The ranch prospered. Robert stayed sober, finding purpose in his carpentry and peace in watching his daughter thrive. Iris became Aunt Iris to the Donovan children, teaching them about their heritage and the strong women who'd loved this land before them. Even Jace eventually found redemption, proving through years of honest work that people could change if given the chance. But on that spring morning, with hope taking her first steps and the future stretching out full of possibility, Cal and Clara simply held each other and watched the sun rise over the land they'd saved. The land that had saved them. No more jokes, no more cruelty, no more being called Scarecrow or Beast or any of the names that had tried to diminish them. Just Cal and Clara Donovan, building a life that would last, on land that was finally, truly, forever theirs. The story that started with a blank letter and malicious laughter ended with love and laughter of a different kind, the kind shared between partners who'd faced the darkness and chosen the light. The kind that echoed across pastures and through barns and into the future they'd build together. And when the wind blew across Ridgebreak Ranch, carrying the scent of wildflowers and possibility, it whispered what Clara and Cal already knew in their hearts. They were home. They were safe. They were loved. And that, finally and completely, was enough.